What's up, guys? It's Austin from Urban City Artists, and
I'm Reardon from Blue Cardinal Comedy, and we're here today to talk about the recent, I guess, gun issues, gun law issues that we're having, but also the recent tragedy in Texas,
yeah,
and about how kind of an all-encompassing, not all-encompassing conversation, but we're going to talk about various aspects of, why are these shootings happening more often? Because if you look at them, the five most deadly mass gun shootings have happened all within the past 5 years or so. Like it just seems they keep on happening with frightening regularity. And
I mean, two of them happened in the past, I think 2 or 3 months.
Exactly,
which is literally at an alarming rate, and that's not including other things that happen.
It's just they're happening more frequently too, but then at the same time, we're not having really a great discussion about changing the gun laws. We're not having a meaningful dialogue about that. And when we know from statistics, they've done a lot of different polls and research on this. Even 70% of NRA members, people that own guns and are part of an advocacy group for gun rights, even 70% of the members there believe in common sense gun law changes, background checks. They agree with the basic things that everyone else wants. And then 94% of Americans want gun laws changed, in general. Everyone thinks that a lot of changes need to happen. But for some reason, if you look at Capitol Hill, there's this they make it seem like there's a 50-50% debate. And there isn't a 50-50% debate. And all they're doing is estranging their voters. And
I think it's because they're playing on this fear aspect of, yes, there is mass shootings happening and terrorist attacks, like what happened in New York and stuff like that. So they're playing off of that fear, which I believe you told me in a different argument has happened in the past in terms of the Bush administration and stuff like that. They play off of the fear of things that are happening, and people are more likely to believe, or I would put that in general. I think people in general are more likely to believe something of terror when they just almost like this not, I'm not gonna say like post-traumatic stress of an event that happened, like New York. 9/11 happened, people were scared.
Yeah,
and
that's the reason why we went to war. Even though if you looked at the evidence, even then the evidence was really flimsy. The reason to go to war in Iraq, but because of fear, people were tricked into doing something that was against their own long-term interests. Because we know now that war against an enemy that didn't attack us led to a financial disaster. Financial disaster of 2008 and things like that. But the problem here is that the long-term consequences aren't even financial in this respect. It's more people are going to get shot. More people are going to get killed in these mass shootings. And it's funny that every single time that we have a mass shooting, there's always this discussion about, oh, well, we're going to work on gun laws, and then we're also, mental health. Because, for instance, right now about the Texas shooting, Trump is saying that the Texas shooting is not a gun issue, which most of America disagrees with him on that.
It's very much a gun issue. I mean, when you have the ability to put a modification onto a gun to make it automatic.
Well, that was the last mass shooting. That was the Texas mass
shooting.
Yeah,
and the thing about it, though, is you can get armor-piercing rounds. I mean, the guy who came in... The Texas shooting specifically, he had a bulletproof vest.
Mm-hmm.
He was armed almost as much as the police.
And when they have ammunition, that armor-piercing rounds, when you have civilians that can overpower the police force, it's unsafe for the police. It's unsafe for us everyday civilians. I mean, at least here in Chicago, we have a huge problem with inner-city violence. There's so many stories, heartbreaking stories I hear about children that are playing in their homes, and then the caliber of the bullets is high enough to go through the house like it's Swiss cheese, and little kids are getting shot while they're playing in their rooms in what should be the safety of their own home, because the caliber of these bullets is so high. And it's, we just need common sense gun law changes. And it's just so strange that even things that we know about, like the gun shop loopholes, I believe that they've taken some steps to get rid of the not gun shop, but gun show loopholes, where essentially if you're having a gun show, you could just sell guns for cash. That was a really big loophole that was happening.
I saw one of the things is like as long as you have your firearms card, you get to walk right in. They're not saying they're not like categorizing on what or not. They're not taking mark of what you're bringing out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure there has to be some type of like regulation on, that they're seeing how much wood people are selling. There has to be something, but
yeah, well, that's the problem is that there's not a lot of oversight. We need more oversight with guns, and it seems what ends up happening though around every election cycle is that people either forget about guns and gun laws. It's like gun rights become a non-issue, and instead people focus on the economy and just knee-jerk reaction, other issues that.
Well, I think it's because of the time you were seeing it. Because we recently watched that, and it was like 2012 or 2007, 2012, and then it goes 2016, 2017, and then a couple of months apart from 2017. Like it
well, that specific thing that we were looking at was the 5 deadliest mass shootings.
Right.
But there's many other mass shootings. Like because a mass shooting I think is categorized as like anything where like more than like 3 people get injured or shot, and with a firearm. And there was another shooting that didn't even get a lot of press that happened just a week or two ago. This guy shot 6 or 7 people, and it got almost no press attention. But I think it might be part of the problem is that they're trying to kind of sequester all these gun issues. They don't want to talk about gun issues. So if they can't sweep it under the rug, they'll sweep it under the rug. If they can't, then they'll just change the nature of the conversation so that we don't actually have to do anything to change the gun laws.
Well, one of the reasons why I brought that up is because I think that at the rate it's going, we might see more, and that's the scary part. And I think that you could have avoided talking about it maybe 10 years ago and stuff like that. But it's becoming, if it keeps going at this process it's going in, it's going to be something you're going to have to address.
Well,
something has to be changed.
That's true, but I would argue it's already reached that point. Like it should be addressed right now by our president.
It should be, but it's not. That's the reality.
Our president is already doing.
It's not a gun issue.
Yeah, he's already starting the conversation of like, well, right now is not the time to talk about gun rights. But 2 weeks ago, when we had another mass shooting, was also not the right time to talk about gun rights and gun laws. And then a month before that, when we had another shooting, it's not the right time. And it just seems like a never-ending cycle. When is the right time to talk about gun rights and common sense gun law changes? Because I mean, truth be told, I'm for guns. Like I think there is something to be said for the sport of shooting. It's for me, it's a fun practice to shoot clay pigeons and, to experiment and have fun, with different kinds of weapons. But the thing is that you have to be responsible. At the end of the day, these are tools. And these are tools that can be used in irresponsible hands.
To end someone's life. People's lives. You know what I mean? There's no, you know what I mean? Like...
And the problem is that to a lot of people, the barrier between sport and what becomes a weapon of mass, pain and killing can be very thin. But I would argue it's not so thin, because for sport at least, you don't go shooting deer with an AK-47. Right. You go shooting deer with a rifle, or maybe let's say a shotgun, right, or a slug or something. Like you go out there with the right tool for the right job. You wouldn't bring armor-piercing rifle rounds to a buck shoot. Like it's just not.
Why do civilians? Why do we need an AR-15?
Why does a civilian need an anti-tank rifle? Like, I mean, not that that's common, but it's just, why do we need much more than we could ever possibly need for home defense? Like, to me, a shotgun is made to clear out a hallway. All I need to defend my home for me is a shotgun. Like, a couple guys are coming out of the hallway trying to do no good. I just cleaned out that hallway with exactly the right tool that I need to do that. So I just, I feel like there's this disconnect between the everyday people that have to deal with the gun violence when we go onto the train or when we have to take the L or walk through our neighborhoods, and then there's the rich people that don't have to deal with these problems, and maybe some of them profiteer off selling guns, because we know that most of the NRA members believe that there should be common sense gun law changes. However, a disproportionate amount of money goes into the NRA to fuel anti-gun law changing, propaganda. So it seems like there's a disconnect within the NRA itself, where you have the everyday people, and then you have the higher administration of the NRA making decisions on behalf of their constituents. But their constituents don't realize that they're kind of being taken for a ride,
I mean, I would go to the extent that we need to tighten the way. There shouldn't just be a waiting period for you to be able to get a gun. Like, it's just not right. I think there needs to be more regulations in terms of, like, there should be a test, maybe. Maybe you had to have passed high school to get a gun. Maybe we should actually do the background check. You know what I mean? Like with him, he literally checked a box saying, nope, never been to prison.
Oh, yeah, the last shooter from the Texas shooting. Also, I don't want to say their names because apparently copycat crimes are a problem. So, but the most recent Texas shooter, he when he was filling out his paperwork in order to get the gun, they asked, have you ever been convicted of a felony? He had, because he'd assaulted his wife and his child at some point in time. But what ended up happening is that he just checked the box, nope,
and nothing happened.
And there was no follow up. There were no consequences. Even for the person that saw that he gave that document to in order to buy the gun, like what was supposed to be the methodology they were supposed to follow in order to make sure that they weren't selling a gun to somebody who just lied on this application. There wasn't. It seems like there wasn't any mechanism put in place to hold the gun owner responsible for their lie, to hold the gun seller responsible for not being thorough with their paperwork, and maybe the fact is that there wasn't a background check needed, and so there wasn't, so there isn't any mechanism put in place, and it's,
I mean, the reality is not everyone should have a gun.
Yeah, but our lawmakers don't want to address that point, and our lawmakers don't want to address the point that there's a lot of
I talk about this test, but how can you test, someone's mental ability?
They're talking about how they want a mental.
That's the thing. You need something like that. You need something to see where someone's at. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
A waiting period is not it's just.
Well, hopefully, I think in the process of getting the FOID card, the government is supposed to do a background check of some kind on you, like just to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, make sure that you haven't committed any crimes, and that you're not blatantly a bad guy. But hopefully, the disconnect between our representatives in the government and the everyday citizens, eventually this disconnect needs to be solved. People need to vote for politicians that don't just remember how bad the gun laws are when somebody gets shot. They need to remember.
What can people do to make sure that happens? How many mass shootings does it take before someone really finally actually does something? Because it's been 2 in a matter of 3 months, and or 3. You said with that other guy. I mean, it's scary, man.
Look at what happened with healthcare. They were going to pass laws with healthcare that were actually going to harm people's healthcare. It was going to take away healthcare benefits, throw a lot of people off healthcare, period. It was really bad legislation that they were trying to pass just a few months ago, if that. And what ended up happening is that people called their congressmen, people called their senators, people called the government, and they made their voices be known that what is happening right now, this change is not acceptable.
Okay, right.
So what we need to do is just have an equal, or some comparable movement of people that organize themselves, and they call their congressmen and they let them know what is happening right now is not acceptable. If you don't change it, just remember, I can vote you out of power. You can lose your job because you're not representing my interests as a constituent. And if enough of these politicians are afraid of their jobs enough, then we can get some changes. It's weird how it works. It's weird how the U.S. People, us citizens, need to treat our congressmen like bad employees that we can fire if they don't do what we want.
What I worry about is with these mass shootings happening, will put people into a fear to buying guns again? To bring up our earlier point, like, do you believe that?
Well,
this is going to put people into that fear mode again.
I know from separate research that what happens with the gun industry is that it goes through periods of like feast or famine, where like when Barack Obama was in power, lots of guns were selling, and now that Trump is in power, they've been talking about this whole war thing and the whole Korea thing. So gun sales, from what I understand, are not exactly plummeting, but what can eventually happen is that people stop buying guns, because you don't need 20 million guns in your house. It's only one person can hold one gun at a time, like, unless you're Ramboing it up. Like, it's just you only need so many firearms in your home, and so I think there reaches a critical mass where they just can't sell any more guns anymore. And but it's those people that are buying guns that's fueling the anti-gun law lobby. So I think what we're going to see is that once gun sales start dropping, the lobbies might not have as much money unless they got reserves. I'm sure they got reserves of money. But the thing is that they might not be as quick to snuff out anti-gun law, conversations and ideas, because they might not have as many resources later. So because right now the Republicans are in power, and the idea is nobody's going to go after your guns. There's no Barack Obama to demonize in order to say that they're going after your guns anymore.
I gotta buy both guns now because maybe my guns are going to get taken away. You know what I mean? Like,
and even then, it was funny that when Barack Obama was in power, he literally had a speech and many things that he published where he said, "I'm not going after pre-existing guns. I'm literally just trying to go after guns that people are going to purchase in the future that could lead to mass shootings or violence of some kind." The laws didn't get passed then because of obvious reasons, that Congress wanted to obstruct any sort of positive changes that could have happened under his leadership. But I think underneath Republicans, there's not as much fear-mongering that they can play on, because they can't just say, "Oh, the leader of the free world wants to take away your guns." Trump really doesn't sound like he wants to take away anybody's guns. He doesn't. His constituency, that small 30% of America that he can trick into being afraid all the time, they're probably not afraid right now of somebody taking their guns. And most Americans are not, especially as the economy gets shittier and shittier, as people make worse and worse long-term decisions for our economy. It's going to make buying guns harder, and it's going to make those corporations, it's going to make their profit margins less, and over time, even though their profit margins are going to be less, there's still going to be mass shootings. It's sad to say that in the future, if there's no changes, we can almost bet that there's going to be more mass shootings. But as the corporations, and this is just my hope. I just hope that there reaches this critical mass where eventually the corporations can't cover up all of the horrible things that are being done with the products that they're selling to people on the cheap.
Right.
So, it sucks that changes have to take a lot of innocent people getting hurt, but in the short term, if we can fix it before it gets to that point, awesome. If we can't fix it before a lot of other innocent people need to get hurt, and then public opinion changes to the point that politicians start losing their jobs, and they start making changes on their own because they realize that their jobs aren't, job security is not there if they don't vote to represent what Americans want. In the long term, there will be changes. In the short term, if people fight for it, there will be changes.
Right.
So to me, there are solutions to this, and it's literally people just have to talk. They have to get just as angry as when the government tries to take away, benefits that you deserve, or they try taking away your health care, or they try, reducing the minimum wage or whatever. As long as you just got to fight for what you want. And right now, a lot of people used to be more afraid about speaking their mind, but I think people have started to realize, at least I was empowered when I saw this healthcare situation looks bad, and then all of a sudden it lost all support. The healthcare.
Well, I think the good part of it is just the social media putting it out there. It's a lot easier to be over the computer and say something inspirational and inspire someone to be like, you know what, maybe this is the wrong decision. It is to really just talk to people. There's a lot of people that just don't want to talk to other people, but if you can talk to someone through social media, Facebook or something like that, then it allows you to have better conversations, because maybe not everyone is able to talk in person because they're just, not everyone's okay with that. But
I think that's why a lot of people like reading and like watching the news, is because it's maybe you don't have friends that you can have a conversation about gun laws and with, but you could watch something like MSNBC, and you can see various people's opinions and see where you fall on that spectrum yourself. So I'm glad that conversation is happening on a lot of news channels. It seems like the media right now is pro changing the gun laws. There's very, very few news stations that are saying that the gun law situation is just fine. There's very few situations where,
But is it for right now because of what just happened? Or is it, like you said, going to blow over? And I think that's the most part that we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see a follow-up on that, because I think...
I don't see Congress right now doing anything, because they all agreed on repealing and replacing it.
I mean, our own president said it's not a problem, and that's the scariest part.
Yeah, our leadership doesn't agree. And actually that would kind of be a death knell for it in the first place, because even if the Senate and Congress got their act together and they passed some sort of law, you still need the president to sign it into law.
Because that can be vetoed real quick.
Yeah, it's either going to veto, or he's going to slow walk it, or, and it's just not, it's going to fizzle,
And then he's going for that 8 years. So he needs to make everyone happy that he can.
Exactly. Although the problem there is that he keeps on estranging that 30%, or he estranges the 30%, and then I don't know. I guess this is outside the scope of our discussion, but we'll see. We'll see because Trump is weaving a very tangled web, and I mean, especially with the Russia investigation, we got to see how things go in the long term with him. But I think what we do need to focus on is getting some, because in our day-to-day lives, when I'm waiting at the red line, or I'm biking through a dangerous neighborhood, that's day to day. I'm afraid of gun violence. I've been in altercations with people, and it's scary that something that could just turn into a minor disagreement with a random person
could be the end of your life.
It could be the end of my life. That guy could just pull out a gun and start shooting it, and
I mean, what are you gonna do? You can't do it.
And if there were common sense laws that took place 10 years ago, that guy probably never would have had a gun in the first place. Or if mental health actually was a priority for this country, if mental health was something that people cared about more than just as a talking point, maybe that person that I get into an altercation with would be less likely to escalate it,
Because he's talked to someone. He's he has maybe the medication to help him out, that he doesn't have these thoughts
or just the mental methodology to deal with stress in a healthy way, because that's another problem, is that mental health. Trump's saying that this is a mental health issue. Well, where's the money for the mental health services? Because again, that's something conservative politicians traditionally, when they're elected, first thing they do is cut mental health. It's one of the mental health, education, public services, infrastructure upgrades. Those are all things that are on the chopping block first off with non-progressive leadership. So I'm hoping to see changes there, but I always try and think of it in the long term, as in there's always a swing. There's a pendulum where you have a movement one way, and then you have another movement the opposite direction. But the pendulum, it doesn't always swing equal. It swings on one side. It's always going to swing stronger, and there's always going to be, like, progress will win out. It's just sometimes we take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but there's still that profit of that 1 step. So,
right.
So I always try and keep that in mind, and as long as we have conversations like this, as long as our conversations aren't censored, and people can have a frank and open discussion about it.
Like, we're not saying guns should be gone.
Oh yeah.
We're just saying
common sense.
People should be regulated on who has them. Not everyone should have
common sense regulations. If you the man who assaulted his family, his wife and his child, should not have been able to buy a gun. Enough said.
Like, and everyone agrees. Buy a pistol. He bought.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
it wasn't a hunting rifle. It wasn't even just a pistol, which I wouldn't be happy with someone who has a record of assaulting people to even get a pistol. But he literally got a rifle.
That's that's something else. Maybe to something for right now is maybe when you're buying a bigger gun, there should be stricter regulations on buying a bigger gun like that. something that can become automatic or something that can be.
But a guy who shouldn't have even had a rifle or a pistol, he got an assault weapon, like literally something meant for warfare. Like, we send a lot of our in the military. That's where people get assault rifles and things like that. So, and then even ex-military members, they've said that before I could even have this assault weapon, I was carrying it around for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 or 3 months, training on how to use this weapon correctly so that it didn't accidentally hurt someone.
Right.
But then these same military guys, they'll go to a gun range and they see somebody who's a civilian buying the same exact weapon, that he had to work so hard just to learn how to use correctly in a safe way, and people have no idea how.
And that's the scary part. That's the thing that I just don't think you should be able to have a gun like that. 9mm, you know what? If it's in your home, protect you, fine, that's fine. But what do you need an assault rifle for? Like who's breaking into your home? You know what I mean?
Why do you need an armor-piercing
bullet
assault weapon with an extended magazine? You don't need that. That is something. I could understand if there was martial law. If we were getting invaded by Canada tomorrow, then sure, you know what?
Right.
We gotta do what we gotta do to defend America. But right now, in times of peace, we don't need this. These are. It's the same reason that people don't have flamethrowers and
grenades
and chemical weapons in their homes. It's just too much. You don't need that. But I think everyone agrees on that point. Again, I think it's just with time, common sense is going to prevail, and people are going to realize that that while you do have the freedom to have your gun, I also have the freedom to live in a safe environment for me and my children. Because a place where people have armor-piercing assault weapons strapped to their back, and a place that is a family-friendly environment, it cannot be the same place. It just isn't. It doesn't exist. Even in the places where people have had weapons, like, for instance, there was years ago, there was a man that went into a movie theater and started shooting.
I remember that.
And there were people in the movie theater that had weapons on them. They had concealed carry. They had weapons with them. And you know what? None of them were able to stop the person doing this mass violence. None of them could, and which is always the argument that the NRA and different gun rights groups and conservative leadership falls back on, is that, we need our guns to defend against bad guys. Well, then please show me the examples where that happened.
It's rare.
Rarely it does happen.
It does happen.
But for the most part, all it does is escalate the situation again, because now the police are going to come, and what they thought was one crazed gunman, now it's 2 or 3 crazed gunmen, and now we don't know who the good guys are anymore. It's just because I have friends that are police officers, and they tell me it's messy. It's not as organized and as clear cut.
I mean, he's not RoboCop. He's not one-shotting the bad guys.
Exactly.
When you're coming, I'm assuming when you're coming in as a police officer, you just see multiple people shooting. You don't know who is
exactly, and it turns into your adrenaline starts running, and it gets messy really quick.
It's instant reactions. These are bullets. These aren't. It's not a D&D game. You're not rolling for and for attack move. It's real life. There's bullets flying around. You don't have time to think, well, who's the bad guy in this situation?
And that's the thing is that's what I'm trying to say, is that it's just all it does is escalate the situation. Having more guns doesn't make us more safe. If it did, gun violence would be a memory. It'd be like, oh yeah, there's a guy who tried mass shooting people, and then Clint Eastwood busted out his revolver and one-shot the dude, and everyone was safe.
Right.
The bad guy killed one person and he was done. I would love to hear that story. That'd be kind of that'd be cool.
But it's just not realistic.
Hear bad thing happened, justice was delivered. That's great. We live in a world where innocent, not a lot of innocent people need to get hurt in order for us to hold the bad guy responsible. But we don't live in that world. Very rarely do we hear these stories where it turns out all right, because of more guns being in the environment. So
to do a brief rundown,
the too long didn't want to listen version is we need common sense gun law changes. The American public, 94% of the American public, or at least agrees in basic changes.
70% of the NRA.
70% of the NRA, even the NRA
there
itself.
should be background checks, which is
background checks, and I thought it was at least 70% believes in background checks and common sense gun law changes. Right. We're not saying go after people's weapons in their homes. We believe in liberty, the idea of liberty, doing what you want as long as you don't hurt anyone else. That makes sense. If you want to go shooting for fun, that's great, but we just want to make it so that people with mental health problems or people that have a history of violence just can't get weapons. And that just
because the reality is, I mean, I think it was something you told me in another time, people are a lot less likely to go stab someone than they are to shoot someone. It's a lot easier to pull the trigger than to go up and get personal.
Makes it too easy.
And that's the scary part. So that's the brief rundown, and we hope you guys like this podcast. If you have any comments or anything like that, make sure to comment, and we'll let you guys we'll for sure reply. And once again, Austin from Urban City Artist, and
I'm Reardon from Blue Cardinal Comedy. Sorry I didn't do anything silly or funny this time around, but we just thought it was really important that we talk about this, especially while there's so many discussions happening, and hopefully we all got something out of it. All right, thank you so much for your time.